Even in a game that's virtually bug-free, I still managed to find them. Go figure. Well, Edutainment Month is drawing to a close, and what better way to end it than with one of the best edutainment titles ever created, Treasure Mountain, which is a part of the Super Solvers series of games. Now, unlike most edutainment titles, which focus on a particular aspect of learning, such as words or math or science or geography, Treasure Mountain actually covers general knowledge, and thus has a wide variety of topics and questions, plus it's designed in such a way that even if you're not old enough to be playing this game, you can still win, it just takes a bit longer. It's hard to really nail down what exactly it is about this game that makes it fun, so let's do the game stats first and we'll figure it out together. Treasure Mountain was created... Not again. Hey Gruzzles, did I ever show you my Sega Death Phaser? I don't think we're ever gonna have to worry about the Gruzzles again. Okay, so Treasure Mountain was created and released by the Learning Company in 1990 and can best be described as a one-player action puzzle game. It supports CGA 4-color, Tandy 16-color, and EGA 16-color graphics, all running at 320x200 resolution, and supports the PC speaker and Tandy 3-voice chipset for sound and music. Suffice to say, the Tandy mode trumps the others, and is the best way to get the higher quality music and sound effects working. As for its current release date, it's still commercial, and while the Learning Company itself no longer offers this game on their website, it's really easy to find on places like Amazon or eBay, though the prices for this game are all over the place. Really though, if you're paying more than $9, you're spending too much. You'll also commonly find this game bundled with Treasure Cove for about the same price. The story goes that the Master of Mischief has gone to a place called Treasure Mountain, stolen the crown from the castle, and hidden all of the treasures. Your task as the Super Solver is to go to this mountain, find the hidden treasures, and place them back in the treasure chest in the castle at the top of the mountain. Once the chest is full, you'll be able to get the crown back and drive away the Master of Mischief. Really though, I have to question what possible reason this guy could have for going to this mountain and doing all of this, short of just being mean and evil for the sake of being mean and evil. But yeah, paper-thin stories aside, the game is surprisingly simple to play, despite its complexities. You start each game inside the clubhouse, or club cave would probably be a better name for it, and from there you must scale the 3 levels of the mountain by finding keys to work your way up. These keys, though, are hidden behind various parts of the scenery, and to reveal them, you must figure out which scenery object the key is hidden within, and toss a magical gold coin in front of that object to get it to disappear briefly so you can acquire the key. The educational component of this game comes from how you figure out where the keys and treasure are hidden in the first place. Wandering around the mountain are these elves, which for the most part don't really do much, but some of the elves carry scrolls with them. When you catch one of these ones, they present you with a word problem and 3 possible answers. If you get the answer wrong, they go on their merry way. If you get the answer right, they give you a few gold coins as well as their scroll, which contains a hint word on it. The key for the current level of the mountain is always hidden behind the one piece of scenery that all 3 hint words can be applied to. And finding treasures works pretty much the same way, except that treasures are hidden behind scenery that matches 2 of the 3 hint words. Of course, it's not quite as simple as just going around to all these scenery objects and making them vanish, as you have a limited number of coins and nets. Coins are used to make scenery vanish to find treasures, but are also used to buy nets. 4 coins for 5 nets, and you use your nets to catch the elves in the first place. If you run out of nets, you need to get more from the net supply stones on either the first or second levels of the mountain. Thankfully, if you miss with a net, you don't lose one. Or if you manage to catch multiple elves in one net, you only lose one net, yet get a gold coin for each elf caught. Catching 2 or more elves at a time is the best way to amass a large number of coins, though this trick doesn't work well with the scroll-carrying elves, just the regular elves are the ones throwing elf dust. Now, elf dust is this magical powder that some of the elves toss at you as your skill level rises. Basically, if the dust touches you, it sucks away a gold coin. It's annoying for sure, but not really that consequential since, so long as you know what you're doing, you should never run out of gold coins. Heck, if you do and you have no nets left either, just walk around until you find some coins laying on the grass. The game is specifically designed so you cannot possibly lose, just get delayed from progressing further. Eventually, you'll get to the castle, climb some ladders both upwards and sideways, reach the room with the treasure chest, place all the treasures you found into the chest, and then get to take one back to the clubhouse for you to play with. And that's really all there is to it. Do this 28 more times and you beat the game. Yeah, despite the fact the game is pretty good, it's really repetitive. And while 29 is the minimum number of times you'll have to scale the mountain, players who can't find all the treasures will have to scale it even more times. Suffice to say, this isn't the kind of game you sit down and play for hours on end. Granted, you could if you really wanted to, but it's the kind of thing you load up, play it for a little, then move on to something else and come back to it later. In fact, if this wasn't an edutainment title, you could almost call it one of the first casual games ever created. Despite its repetitive nature though, it's surprisingly fun, and I think this boils down to the fact that the educational component is, well, practical. Answering many of the questions often comes down to skill over knowledge, and you also need to recognize patterns and such to match the scenery with the hints you get, so that you're not wasting time and coins just going through each piece of scenery one at a time. And yet you could do that if you really wanted to, so this game is accessible to players of all ages, and even older players may occasionally catch a question they're not quite sure about. Heck, the game doesn't really teach you anything at all, it's just more about answering questions, so the educational component is much more subtle and not forced in the player's face. Granted, there are a couple minor things that bother me about this game. Firstly, the controls are really lagged, and sometimes they don't even respond properly. And considering there's virtually no need for quick reflexes or pixel-perfect accuracy, it's not that big a deal, but it sure is noticeable. Also, buying nets is a really slow process, and you're going to be spending almost as much time buying nets as you will be playing the actual game. But yeah, minor complaints, nothing that really stands in the way of the gameplay itself. As for the treasures themselves though, you're allowed to play with them while in the clubhouse, but all this amounts to is watching a really fast animation. Though occasionally you'll get a treasure that simply flips back and forth when you try to play with it, and this is because some of the treasures are linked with other treasures. So to see the animation, you need to have both of the treasures that are linked together. Like the teddy bear in the honey pot, or the handkerchief in the magic lamp. There's also 3 different train cars that you can find, and you need all 3 of them to play with the train. You can also take a look at all of the treasures you've collected lined up at the back of the clubhouse. Don't really have too much else to say about this game, except for just some quick general tips for when it comes to dealing with the in-game hints. Now, some of the hints that you're given imply other words at the same time. For example, if you get the hint rectangle, it may also count squares, but if you get the hint square, it will not count rectangles. Also, the word tall can be substituted for the word big, and also keep in mind that size is relative. When you get the word small or smallest, it means relative to all identical objects. So a small tree is still pretty darn big. There just happens to be bigger trees. Lastly, plurals are tracked properly. So if you get the singular form of a word, there will only be one of that object. Whereas if you get the plural form of a word, there will always be more than one. And yeah, that's all I gotta say about Treasure Mountain. This is without a doubt one of the best edutainment titles ever made, because it doesn't feel like edutainment half the time, and yet the educational component is clearly there, because you wouldn't be able to get very far very fast without having math skills, word skills, animal knowledge, and more. It's also one of the very few edutainment titles that is accessible by players of all ages, and also one of the few that's still easy to get a hold of despite the fact that the company that made it doesn't sell it anymore. Ultimately, it's just an all-around great game. DOSBox settings are simple enough, just leave cycle set to auto and make sure to set the machine type to Tandy mode so you can get the full quality audio effects. There's no joystick support in the game, and you could theoretically use the DOSBox keymapper to get around that, but because of how lagged the controls are, you're probably better off sticking with the keyboard. There's also mouse control too, but it's a joke, so don't even bother. Anywho, that's all for today's episode of Ancient DOS Games. Next week's a filler, and I have a bit of a surprise for everyone, so make sure to stay tuned to see what I've got in store.